Very excited to introduce return speaker Gary Perez from the Native American Church and the Indigenous Cultures Institute of San Marcos. For those of you who were here last year, Gary gave a version of this presentation at the 20th anniversary celebration for the SOS Ordinance on the four fountain springs of Texas and their role in pre-Columbian and contemporary indigenous cultures. Gary's the custodian of the Native American Church National Trust in Mirando City and also the Sacred Sites Director of the Indigenous Cultures Institute in San Marcos. Gary's just launching a speaking tour on this topic around the state. He's got some postcards. He'll be back in Austin on September 22nd at the Emma Barrientos Mexican-American Cultural Center. If you like what you hear today, tell your friends about it and tell them to come hear Gary on September 22nd. Gary's done some incredible research and inquiry and thinking about some of the cave paintings and in particular the White Shaman panel in West Texas, and how a portion of that tells a story about land and water and people in central and south central Texas. And you're here to hear about the Four Fountain Springs of Texas. Thank you so much, Gary.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone. I can't hear it. Y'all can hear me. I can't hear the speakers behind me. I'm the custodian of the Native American Church National Trust down in Mirando City, and that's where all the tribes go down, their pilgrimage down there, and they have their peyote ceremonies on my grandmother's property. They've been doing so for the last 80 years. Thank you. They've been doing so for the last 80 years, and when she passed on, my family took over for her family. And one of the things that we do there, besides host the ceremonies, is introduce them to these waters, Yanawana. Yanawana means spirit waters in our language, and we gather water from these four fountain springs that Bill talked about in Austin, San Marcos, New Braunfels, and San Antonio, and we take it down to the pilgrimage site and introduce it as Yanawana, because Yanawana is the most prominent word sung in the Native American Church. You pull up the Native American Church and you listen to those songs, and you're going to hear variations of the word Yanawana. And in our language, that means spirit waters, the waters of which my people were born from according to our creation story. So what I'd like to do today is I'd like to, well, first of all, before I forget, last year I told everyone a story about how I was involved in the late 90s in the working with the Barton Springs Salamander here at Barton Springs, and I was asked by a company out of Florida called Armada Services to come and introduce the technology we were using at SeaWorld to clean up the bottom of the pools at SeaWorld. And algae is really a big problem at SeaWorld. When I got there and we were developing the dive team unit, the maintenance team, they saw how I was going to manage all that. We did pretty well, and they took all the chlorine out of the water. And we had algae blooms, unbelievable blooms, and the only way to stay on top of it was to be on top of it. If we cleaned the pool, we scrubbed it and sucked all the algae out, we went in the next day, no matter how tired we were. And we stayed on top of it until we made the surface just about sterile. You know, where it would go for at least 2 or 3 weeks without ever coming back in. If you stayed on top of it, it didn't grow back for a year. We managed to take the chlorine completely out of the water so that the animals wouldn't suffer any of its effects. So we're really proud of that work, and we're proud of our work our work here at Barton Springs. So I'm going to take my presentation today and break it down a little bit, because if I don't, I'll get off track. And I'm going to read out of a book called Sovereign Bones: New Native American Writing, edited by Eric Gransworth. And the first thing I'm going to, it's a page, this is Indigenous Language Consciousness, Being, Place, and Sovereignty. The nature of language as expressed by indigenous human culture has to do with an intuitive and vital connection that human beings have with the natural earth process or dynamic. In other words, we as indigenous people speak the language that directly comes from the natural forces all around us. Hence Yanawana, spirit waters. The waters were fountains. You know, how does a water defy gravity? That's amazing. Language comes directly from the natural environment. Simply put, human language comes from Mother Earth, the natural environment, namely the natural world within which we strive. So, okay, I'm a bit nervous, folks. Like I said, Yanawana is translated into Hokan is spirit waters. Why spirit waters? Well, because we can't explain why water simply defies gravity and shoots 20 feet up in the air. Barton Springs was described in Bruin and Bessie, I think I said that right, as bursting out of the foot of a mountain. The Blue Hole Incarnate Word, or San Antonio Springs, was a 20-foot geyser. Comal Springs were called the fountains. Back in 1924, this guy named Dave Orchard witnessed a group of 5 Ponca Indians passing through this region, and they stopped at the Blue Hole at Incarnate Word, and they said that they had to stop there. They had to stop at 4 places. 5 Poncas stopping at 4 places. The last one of which was the Blue Hole at Incarnate Word, because they said, quote, "We must absolutely be pure before we go down and collect grandfather peyote." So they would stop there. They would eat a concoction of tobacco and mountain laurel seeds, beans, and I can't remember what all else, but the reaction when you eat it is immediate, and it cleans everything about you out. Within minutes, you're absolutely pure, man. Pretty wild stuff. So water is a big part of our ceremony. In our creation story, when the sun went down into the underworld and got together with the deer in the underworld, they traveled through the underworld in search of the first sunrise. The sun wasn't a very powerful sun. It was a cold, dark, and it was wet. Can you tell me what sun I'm talking about? The cold, dark, the winter sun. It's when it's in the lowest in the sky. Okay, so it goes into the underworld in search of the sun that will heat up the earth. So anyway, right at midnight, right about that time, the moon, of course, when the sun is the lowest in the sky, the moon is the highest in the sky, and especially a supermoon. Well, what happens when the moon is full and it's up on high? It acts on the tides. So it's how our ancestors viewed these fountain springs. Well, the story says that on the full moon, the supermoon, our Mother Earth's water broke, which explains the fountains. And we were born. Our people were born. So the sun continues on its journey to the first sunrise. So what I'll do now is I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next. Give me a second here. Folks, I had no idea I was going to be this nervous. I'm usually pretty good at this. Thank you. For Indigenous American people, well, no, I'll skip that. Let's see. Let me just read it all. For Indigenous American people, home used to be simple. You had a home, you could return to it if you chose to do so. You belonged to a place, and there was no question about the place which you belonged. Your homeland was a source of your identity, and that was a major part of your identifiable place in culture society. Returning home was a simple matter of returning to the place where you belonged. This ultimately has to do with the indigenous language and the question of sovereignty. And further, sovereignty has to do with consciousness and being consciousness. In the past 40 years, a great deal of concern has been expressed within indigenous communities of the Americas regarding the viability of indigenous languages. Some have said that because of the vast social cultural changes, many of them unsought and undesired, resulting in assimilation and acculturation of indigenous peoples into mainstream society and culture. Indigenous languages are being lost. Some say that along with the loss of indigenous languages has been a mainstream education that has readily replaced indigenous languages with English, Spanish, and French, resulting in a rapid loss of our languages. Well, language comes from the land. You know, if we say that these are fountain springs, and if our ancestors said, wow, that's spirit, that's water spirit, that's spirit water, yana wana, let's sing that. That's what it is. So the language, that word, comes derived from our interpretation of the action of the water shooting out, and then it's turned into a story of a creation story. So what I'd like to do today is share a little bit about the metaphysics of what all that entails. And being is place, existence is being equals place equals language equals reality. Okay? Myself being here, my language, and how I see things is our reality. And one of the reasons why I had to mention a little bit about the metaphysics is that there are two worlds that we consider to be real. One is the world where we use metaphysics to somehow get in touch with the other world, the other reality, the spiritual reality. And I'm going to try and express it in a story, something that happened to me a while back. When we started collecting water from these springs for the Native American church, my grandfather and I had been estranged for a while. And I knew that he was sick. And I called him up one day and I said, you know, Grandpa, I'm at the peyote gardens now. And I have resources. And if you ever need anything, prayer, you know, our relatives, our families are gathering water. If you ever need water or peyote, you know, let me know and I'd be happy to help you out. I didn't know he was sick though. I didn't know he was sick. He says, no, you know, I'm all right, Gary, I'm going to be okay. But I really appreciate you making that offer. I said, okay. So a couple of months later, we were at Jacob's Well. We had just sung to the water at Jacob's Well and drawed the water for the ceremonies down at the gardens. And when we were walking away from Jacob's Well, a young man walked up to me and said, you know, I see you've got a gourd box, a cedar gourd box. Did y'all just come out of a ceremony? I said, no, not a Native American church ceremony. We just got through gathering water for the Native American church. But all of this water is heading down to the peyote gardens for the pilgrimages. And this young man didn't know who he was. He says, well, I'm going to a ceremony tonight. And I said, really, for who? Well, it's for Dr. Mario Garza. And I said, that's my grandpa. You know? So I said, are you married? He said, yes. Well, get your wife and get with my wife and get some of this water, take it in a bucket to that ceremony. That's where it needs to go, right? So how did that happen? Well, what happened is, who here is at Jacob's Well? Okay. Does anybody remember? David Baker. Thanks for coming, man. Really appreciate it. How old are when they measure the isotopes in the water at Jacob's Well, David, how old is the water that passes through? How long ago did it fall out of the sky?
It depends. But the base flow, the old water, is over a couple of thousand years old.
A couple of thousand years old. Okay. So this is what we say happened, according to the story that I told you, is that a couple of thousand years ago, our ancestors were hanging around Jacob's Well having ceremony. And they were singing, okay? Or it really could have been anywhere. But they were singing, and the vibration that's picked up by the water hears that sound. And that water rose up into the sky, fell into the watershed, okay? took 2,000 years for it to come up. And on the day that we were there and we sang to that water immediately had memory. Oh, I know what this is all about. So 10 minutes after we drew the water from the springs, that water is going to a peyote ceremony that we had no idea about. And that's where you begin to see the reality, the spiritual reality. And it isn't something that we pursue. It's something that just happens as a result of having this relationship with this water for the last few thousand years, singing to it in our language. So, here okay, and then there's another section here I wanted to read to you. Since the time of creation, American Indian people have known that memory is stored in the blood and the bones of people for thousands of years before time. Elders passed on traditions in the language of the people, recording bone memories through oral traditions and on the material objects made of wood, skins, rocks, textiles, basketry, and ivory. These items reminded the people of their memories brought to them to light again. The source of this knowledge is found in the bones of the people, living remains that speak into many ways to inform and continue the circle, tying the past to the present. Native storytellers, singers, artists, writers, musicians, and others draw on from their bone memory to keep the traditions alive and make them live within their relatives. And like a great whirlwind, contemporary people add to tribal memories that will be preserved and treasured for generations to come. The body stores tradition in its bones, where genetic information lives beyond the life of the person and is transferred into the structural material of his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Deposits of knowledge, understanding, and being live in the bones of Indian people. And they share these with those who listen and learn. So what I'd like to do now is, a couple of years ago, I was invited out to West Texas to look at the rock art, specifically this painting called the White Shaman painting, and there's a rendering up on the fence up here, was done by a gentleman here in Austin by the name of Michael O'Brien. And it was done from the photographs that were taken by this guy named Jimmy Zentgraf for many, many years. And he took those photographs and he took them all together and came up with this rendering of the White Shaman panel. Well, when I was invited to see the White Shaman panel, I noticed, and the story behind it was being shared with me about the Huichol pilgrimage to their holy land on the other side of the border. I didn't hear very much of the story, but when I looked at it, I said, "Gosh, you know, that looks like springs to me. That looks like land formations. Those look like caves, you know." And since then, I've gathered a team together: a geologist, an astronomer, a geographer, an archaeologist. Geographer from A&M, and we're deciphering this panel using science rather than the story. The story's there. The story about the deer going through following the deer through the underworld, and then finding the first sunrise, and the deer rises ahead of the sun, and the sun kills the deer, and that's the beginning. Well, it's in the interim, when the full moon rises, we are born, you know, in the story. So what I'm going to try to do is go over to that painting and share some of what we've discovered with you guys. And what I want to say is that at the point that this came about, that this discovery was made, I was sitting at my grandmother's table down in Mirando City, in her home, eating her food, donated by the Native American Church. And I had this epiphany at that moment. So even though she's gone, she's no longer with us, I really want to thank her very much for helping us find what we've discovered. So I'm going to put this down, and hopefully I'm loud enough, Dave. Maybe, let's see. Gosh, folks, I don't think I've ever been this nervous. I don't know why. This is strange. All right, metaphysics. Yeah. So, right away, what I'd like to point out is just as geographic imagery systems. This is layers. This is science right here. This is a map of Texas with all the counties, the GPS locations of Barton Springs, San Marcos Springs, Comal Springs, and San Antonio Springs is your legend. This is done by a young man here in Austin by the name of Andrew May. By the way, when I asked him if he could do this for me, I said, "What are you doing right now?" He says, "Well, I'm mapping Webb County for fracking." And I said, "Yeah, that's where the peyote grows, bro." And he said, "Well, I'm sorry." I said, "No, don't worry about it." Anyway, fracking never came to that region, but the wind farms did. So, but they still had to clear cut the land to get to put the wind farms in. You know what I mean? So we lost the peyote anyway. Here's those 4 dots in the painting. Okay. Our scientists and myself say that you are here. Okay. So what I'd like to do today, and our geologist Nico's here, I'm just really fascinated with your talk today, man. I love that. And I'm just going to get straight to the point. This is Sonora Caverns. Sonora Caverns, when you look at it in the outline, looks like this. Right to the right of it is a headless being stretched out like this. Okay? This is the Devil's Sinkhole. Okay? Right above the Devil's Sinkhole is Enchanted Rock. Okay? Enchanted Rock used to be her head. This is a decapitated, headless, well, that's redundant, headless moon goddess. So Sonora Caverns, the mother or the earth being, was decapitated at Devil's Sinkhole, and Enchanted Rock was her head, and their head became the moon. Okay? You notice how the moon is up over the 4 fountain springs where the light is cast this way. You see all the bursting color to the right of the black dots? That's a rainbow that's being created over the waters as the full moon is up on high. This is the part of the story where our ancestors were born from these springs. So, if this is Sonora Caverns, and if this is a Devil's Sinkhole, and if this is a headless moon goddess, and this is the moon, then what is creating the headless moon goddess? What can anybody think about what this could be? Okay, remember the moon is up on high. The point of decapitation is a hole. Anybody? Yeah, it's a cave. So what's happening? What?
Fountain.
No. Let me show you right over here. This isn't the Devil's Sinkhole, but this is what happens when a full moon passes over it. So what exactly are? Whoops. So what is the headless moon goddess then? It's a shaft of light. Okay. So, real quick, I don't know how much time I've got left. Real quick, according to the science, this white line is the sun's path along the ecliptic on a straight line between San Angelo, Texas, and over here towards the Gulf of Mexico, the point of this where the sun rises. Okay. And this is the time setting is the winter solstice. So at San Angelo on December 21st, 2012, Venus, the deer, rose between the 2 buttes in San Angelo. And then the sun rose directly behind it. As soon as Venus was sun was up high in the sky, it destroyed Venus. And here you have a sun character with an atlatl, and up here you have a deer with a spear spearing its heart. Okay? Matt, where's Matt? Matt was asking me just a little while ago if this had been identified as the dark rift in the sky, and if this had been identified as the Milky Way. Could those be? Are there constellations in this painting? I said yes. Dr. Carolyn Boyd, who's spearheading the study on this rock art, says that this is analogous to the Milky Way, and the dark rift in the sky. Now, if you're standing at San Angelo and the sun is rising, you're watching it in winter solstice on December 21st, 2012, and you remove the light from the sky, the dark rift is right on the horizon. Okay? That tells me that the ancestors who did this 4,000 years ago, their prediction predates the Mayan prediction. Because the Mayas, their culture is only, what, 1,500, 2,000 years at the most. This is 4,000 years old. This just blows my mind. Anyway, this is our story. The sun goes down in the underworld. Here's the deer. The deer guides us. We are born at the moon. The Venus, and the sun rises and it destroys the deer. And in the morning in our ceremonies, we eat deer meat. And we celebrate life. And that's the way that is. Okay, so I need to take a break here. I hope somebody has questions because I can't keep this up anymore. So I'm really nervous. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Will you talk a little bit about, you referenced it, but will you go back to those maps and reference the overlay of those 4 dots with the actual geographic, the GIS map of the 4 fountains?
Yes, ma'am. Here are these 4 dots right here, and they're connected by a red squiggly line. And I asked my geologist, I said, what constitutes that the squiggly line suddenly kind of goes this way? And my geologist said, well, that's where the Balcones Escarpment suddenly turns to the left and goes towards Uvalde in that area. It just comes down and it goes in that direction, the Balcones Escarpment. Nico, you have any?
No, that looks right. The Balcones Escarpment kind of veers that way, and so
just kind of, well, well, here it is. You see, using GIS, you see how it's going this way, and then it just kind of goes suddenly goes that way. This is the edge of the Balcones Escarpment. Mathematics don't lie. The scale of this painting, this is Menard, Texas. This is San Angelo. The distance between Menard and San Angelo is 68 miles. The difference between Menard and Enchanted Rock is 68 miles. The distance from here to here is 17 inches, which equals 68 miles. So what you're seeing here is your line of solstice across Texas, providing that you are in San Angelo behind the buttes, watching the sunrise. These 2 locations right here, these blue dots, what Dr. Boyd calls the land of the black and the red, we've been able to narrow it down to 2 places. That's why there are 2 dots in this region. This would be Longhorn Caverns, and this would be Jacob's Well. Okay? In the landscape, these 2 locations would be like this along the map of Texas. If you go to Longhorn Caverns and you type it up and you do images, the figure of a deer, they call it a dog, the Queen Shepherd, we call it a deer. There's a deer that was naturally formed, a form that was naturally formed in this cave. Looks, has a deer tail. So there's your deer in the underworld. And the deer in the underworld is analogous to Venus. Venus that sets behind the sun. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know the significance of San Angelo being the viewing point?
That's a great question. That'll just take a moment. When you're at San Angelo and you're watching, you're in the winter solstice and you're watching the sun rise, the sun will rise, and then 6 months later, if you're standing on either side of the buttes, the sun will set. Okay? Also, if you're standing at San Angelo and the winter solstice and you see the sunrise and you sit there and you wait for 6 months, the full moon will rise between the buttes. Okay? Now, at solstice, the buttes are aligned in such a way that if you stand behind the buttes on either side watching the sunrise or the sunset, you'll also get a moonrise and a moonset. So what that does is it divides time up. It divided time up for our people. And in that way we developed the first clock, the first timekeeper. This is the timekeeper. What blows me away is that on December 21st, 2012, this piece of artwork came alive in real time. And it will do so thereafter, because right now the sun is passing through the dark rift every day, every day, every day. The sun passes through the dark rift all the time. It's just that it just happened to on December 21st, 2012, it lined up with the horizon, your horizon behind the buttes, then your morning star, then your sun. And that's exactly what you have there. Anything else? Yes, sir.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, can you remind me, where was this painting found again?
This painting is out in West Texas. It's north of Comstock, north of Del Rio, about 30 minutes, and it's on a cliff, looking down at the the Pecos River, facing where the Pecos joins the Rio Grande, going this way.
Then the other two questions that I had. What are some of the tools that they would be able to get something so mathematically accurate for this?
You see, that was 4,000 years ago, man. Okay, I'll tell you what, they had no tools. What they had was resourcefulness. They were resourceful. They were observant. They were at the place. You have to go to these places and stand there and watch the sunrise or the sunset or the moonrise or the moonset or Venus setting or Venus rising in order to get it. You know what I mean? You got to put boots on the ground. And that's one of the things we haven't had a chance to do. We've got the science, now we got to go there and observe.
Just to end real quick, is this common in a lot of paintings? Does this mirror like any paintings that are out there?
I'll tell you what this mirrors. Yes, it does. There are other patterns and other rock art out in West Texas that parts of this are in other paintings, but this is the only painting where everything comes together all at once. You know, you'll find the sun and the stars in another painting mixed up with some other, possibly astronomy or landscape. But this is where everything, all of the patterns that Dr. Boyd has found, you know, the continuous patterns, where it all comes together at this point. But the other thing is, if you heard the story, the sun and the deer go through the underworld, and then the deer rises and the sun kills the deer, and the deer becomes spirit, and you have a trilogy: the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. So you'll see this in religions all over the world, you know, Egyptian, Christian, you know, it's analogous to a lot of things. It's very universal, this is. But what's cool is this was captured in Texas. Somebody had a, yes, sir?
Just a couple of factual questions. One is, if it's rock art, I presume it was authenticated by the dating of the rock.
Yes, it was AMS. It was it was dated.
Okay, so that's why it's 4,000 years old. The second question is, presumably the rock would have no color. It would just be chiseled out on rock, the art. So my question is, the colors, the green, the orange, and the red, they were superimposed by O'Brien, or
no? The color is still in the painting.
Oh, the color is still
the colors are still there, and even the colors that are faded, they're able to pull out with some kind of cool device, where you can see the colors that are gone now, and actually create more of the puzzle that's missing. And you can see how it was composed. Black was laid down first, and then red, and then yellow, and then white. And some folks ask, well, was it done over a period of years? And I say, and according to Dr. Boyd, she said, no, it was done all at once. Any other questions?
Well, did they analyze the texture of the color? Because, for example, in Egypt, very old, some of the paintings they discovered in the Valley of the Kings, the chemical analysis of the colors. A, there has to be very, very little precipitation for the color to remain.
Right.
And B, they have to test it to ensure that the chemical consistency of the color was consistent with what the foliage was presumed to be at that time.
Check.
Is that how they did it?
Yes, absolutely. They have archaeobotanists, paleobotanists. I don't know about paleobotanists. Yeah, paleobotanists looking at this. Dr. Boyd's all this. Let me just say this. I think I'm coming to the end of my time.
Yeah, just
about 3 more minutes.
Let me just say this. Dr. Boyd did the ethnographic reach on this painting. Okay, she said, you know, this could be a Huichol or Mexican story of the creation of the cosmos. And I don't disagree with her whatsoever. What I'm saying, and what my team is discovering, is that it's a map of Texas. So if the ethnography matches the geography, then where did the Mexicans come from? Where did the Huichols come from? If that painting came alive on December 21st, 2012, where did the Mayas come from? Not to mention, again, this painting predates the Mayas by 3,000 years. Okay? Well, thank you very much.